Hello, I'm Ron Schmidt, and this is my story. I come from a small town in Kansas, but not from a real strong Christian home. My mom went to church every Sunday. My dad didn't necessarily go very often. She took all of us kids to Sunday school every Sunday, which introduced me to church. But I was basically going to see friends, not to get anything really out of Sunday school. Then during my 8th grade final exams, I was notified that my father had died from unexpectedly from a heart attack. And this really changed me because it suddenly made me the oldest child at home with a single mother. So I felt the responsibility to help out, but I also felt like I wanted to have a lot of fun, which I managed to do. In Kansas on the farm, you could get a restricted license at 14, and I certainly took advantage of that. I immediately went and got my license, bought a car, and even though the rules were to drive to and from work directly and to and from school directly, I took many alternate routes and really enjoyed my life. The only thing I didn't do is with all the stupid mistakes I made, I never drank, I never smoked, and I never took drugs because I had a goal to get to college for future career purposes, and the only way I figured I could get there was through a sports scholarship. So I really worked hard at that, and God blessed me with that. Even though I didn't realize at the time it was God, He blessed me and got me there. I wanted to fly, but I found out that break after my first semester of freshman year, I couldn't do that with the Air Force because of being colorblind, and that put my world upside down. So I quit school, just did another job for a few months, and in May I joined the Air Force just to try and get my life together. 4 years helped. I realized during that time that I couldn't fly. I wanted to be a teacher. And teaching was so rewarding. I loved it. I taught my first 2.5 years of teaching was in Melbourne, Australia. I left right after graduation. I had met Barbara my senior year in college, and so after I left, she had to come later. She got there about 3 months later. We were married immediately, and she had an immediate impact on me because she didn't like to have the smoke. I immediately quit smoking. So we were there 2 years. We had our first child there and moved back to the States. I taught school in a small rural community. I coached. I loved it, but was offered a better coaching job at another small school. So I moved to it. But I realized even with that, we couldn't make ends meet from month to month because teachers' pay was so low at that time. And both of us had a commitment that Barbara would stay home with the children. And during that year, during the second year that I was teaching, we had our second child, Angie. So I quit, went back to graduate school, got my graduate degree, and started working as a school psychologist. And lo and behold, the Department of Defense offered me a job to go to Germany. I jumped at it because Barbara and I both like traveling. So we went to Germany. After 3 years working for Department of Defense, the Army opened up a program where they needed child psychologists, which is what I was doing. I was a school I got school psychology, and then I went on for my doctorate for child psychology. So it fit perfect because they wanted psychologists to work with dependents. So I got a job with the Army. The only drawback was I had to sign a paper that said I agreed to go anywhere, anytime that the Army wanted to send me. So that put me on the same rotation schedule as any military, which meant we moved several times. We were in Europe for 11 years, and we were in 4 different locations during that 11 years. But we enjoyed it because we got to to travel all over Europe. We came back to the U.S., and it wasn't long after that, well, it was 4 years later, when it was about 6 years later, I'm sorry. I was fortunate in that I got a concurrent assignment at that same location so we could stay there. She graduated, started college, and then she left for Russia on the mission field. So we no longer had a need to be in the U.S. I put in a dream sheet to go back to Europe, and they sent me back to Europe, and I was in Europe for another 4 years, 2 different locations. Came back to the States, then ended up going to Korea on an unaccompanied. Came back from that and went to DC and then retired. So that's my career, but during that time, I became very active in the church. I had not been a Christian when I married Barbara, but she was, and her influence. I accepted Christ just about a month and a half before I turned 31, and I did everything I could to get involved in every church we were at. And in military chapels, that's easy to do. So I retired, and first thing that happened on retirement was I hadn't been, no, it was even before retirement. I came down with Hodgkin's lymphoma, but God got me through it. It wasn't a problem. A few lingering side effects, but that's it. Then 5 years later, I got large diffuse B-cell lymphoma, and that was a little more of a struggle. The chemotherapy was much stronger. I'm still having effects from that chemotherapy, but again, God got me through it. And I never doubted. Each time I turned it over to God and said, God, this is yours. If you want me to come home, I'm ready. If you want to keep me on this earth to work for you, I'm happy to do that. And I never worried. I knew God had it. And then at the end of the second cancer, they found cancer in my tonsils. Again, I turned it over to God, but it was an easy fix. They just did surgery. So I have tried for everything that comes up to turn it to God and not let it worry me. And I found that to be the best thing for me. Keep a positive attitude and not let my medical issues, and I've had a few, really bother me. But when people ask me, have you seen God in your life? And if so, give an example. The first thing that always comes to my mind is when our son was a junior in high school. He had been back to the States to visit grandparents the summer before. And he said in March, he wanted to go back to the States for his senior year. And by mid-August, the family was back in the States. And I never dreamed. I was ready to resign my job. I was ready to go back to civilian life total. But God answered our prayers, and we ended up back in the States. So I have found that throughout my life, whether it be career, medical, or any other issues we've had, turning it over to God works. And I try to keep as positive an attitude as I can. So my whole purpose in giving my story is that if there's someone out there who is going through any kind of trial, whether it be marriage, relationship, or whatever, that you turn it over to God, have faith that He will handle it, and keep positive if you can. And to give a quote from a famous FCC theologian, Greg Gray, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.